ignition switches. On. RPM switches. Set. TD switches. Normal. Doors and hatches. Closed. Light out. Strobe light. On. Restart check is complete. Clear left. Engineers, start number 2. Starting 2. Wind 310, Pilot Project Podcast. Clear takeoff. Runway 31 left.
All right, after a long break, we are back and ready for departure here at the Pilot Project Podcast, the best source for stories and advice from the pilots of the RCAF. I'm your host, Brian Morrison. With me today is my favorite repeat guest, my wife, Melissa. Melissa, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
A lot has changed in the last 7 months, and we figured we owe you some explanation for our absence as well, so let's dive into it. As with the last time I had Melissa on the show, we're going to reverse roles, so at this point I'm going to hand over the hosting duties to Melissa, and I'll be in the guest seat for the rest of the episode.
Before I get started, I'm going to introduce you, Bryan, as our guest by reading your bio. Bryan grew up going to air shows and has always wanted to be a pilot. He got his start flying in the Air Cadet program as a teenager. When he needed money for university and the pilot trade was open, necessity and opportunity came together. Bryan joined the Canadian Armed Forces on June 14, 2006, 2 days after his 20th birthday. He signed up originally for 12 years through the ROTP program. After finishing his degree in commercial aviation management at the University of Western Ontario, he was posted as a second lieutenant to 400 Tactical Helicopter Squadron, where he worked in ops while he waited to go to Moose Jaw. After a 16-month wait, it was finally time to go to Moose Jaw, where Bryan completed his Phase 2 training and finished at the top of his course. Bryan then went on to complete multi-engine training in Portage la Prairie, where he earned the Hal Wishart Award for Top Multi-Engine Student. Bryan requested and was assigned to 405 Long Range Patrol Squadron to fly the CP-140 Aurora in Greenwood, Nova Scotia. After working in ops for 17 months, he finally began training on the Aurora, which he completed about 8 months later. After spending a month in Hawaii, Bryan came home to marry me, the love of his life. When he requested leave for his honeymoon, he was told to wait as something was coming down the pipe. A month after getting married, Bryan deployed to Kuwait to fly surveillance flights in Iraq for Operation Impact for Roto Zero. He was gone for 4 months, then home for 3, and gone for a second 3-month tour. It would be over 2 years before Bryan had spent more days home with me than away on the road. In his first 3 years on the Aurora, he was away for 314 days. Highlights from these years included flying across Canada, including the Arctic, Kuwait, Brazil, Scotland, San Diego, Hawaii, Florida, and the Azores. During that time, Bryan upgraded to aircraft captain on his 30th birthday and later upgraded to crew commander. After their first son Hendrik was born, Bryan took parental leave and upon return was requalified just in time to be posted to 3 CFFTS as an instructor. After their second son Theo was born, and while Bryan was on parental leave, he was diagnosed with other specified trauma and stressor-related disorder, as well as generalized anxiety disorder, which led to his medical release after 18 years of service on July 2, 2024. During his time in the RCAF, Bryan has flown for approximately 1,700 hours and has loved every minute of it. Throughout his career, there have been many pauses and setbacks, but he has always persevered, as we know he will with whatever comes next. All right, Bryan, let's start with the most obvious question. Why haven't you been putting out new episodes for the last 7 months?
So initially, when I started doing the show, I thought that I had followed all the rules and regulations for what was required, but there are no written rules that specifically talk about podcasts. So I really just had to do my best, talk to the public affairs officers, and sort of hope that I had all the T's crossed and the I's dotted. After about a year, somebody let me know that I should have had permission from my commanding officer as well, which I hadn't done originally. So I paused the show and applied for permission. And unfortunately, just the way bureaucracy works sometimes, it took over 6 months before I got an answer. That being said, in the meantime, I have done a few interviews that I'm really excited to air over the summer and fall.
When we last checked in and spoke about your mental health, we noted you were possibly heading for a medical release. Where is that process at?
So as we mentioned in my bio, and as we suspected would happen, I was medically released from the Canadian Armed Forces. My last day was actually last Tuesday, July the 2nd, so I am now a civilian.
How does it feel to be a civilian?
To be honest, I'm still processing that. I have a peer support person that I talk to fairly regularly, and he says that it takes around 3 to 5 years for it to really set in and to come to grips with the change. So I'm trying to take my time and work through it. In some ways, it's nice. I'm looking forward to the unlimited vacation time, at least until I figure out what's next. But there's definitely things I miss.
How do you feel about being medically released?
I have mixed emotions about it for sure. I'm mostly at peace with it because I knew that it was what's right for my health and for the family. But that being said, it's a dream job, so it's very hard to walk away from. How would you say the process has been for you?
It's been rough. It's my nice way to put it. It's just been a lot of like managing more of the house and helping you manage kind of the roller coaster that you've been on. There's been like a lot of highs and lows with anyone's mental health, really. There's good times and bad times. The roller coaster has just been a little bit more than we were kind of used to. We've kind of stabilized a little bit. And the whole process has just had so much uncertainty to it, which has caused a big spike in your anxiety. So the fall from that is that there's more for me to pick up and do because you're frozen a lot more of the time. So it's definitely been rough, but at the same time, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be because you've grown so much in the last couple of years.
Yeah. And definitely, like I said, I'm at peace with it, and that's true. But that doesn't mean it hasn't been a hard process for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So you're officially done your RCAF career. So I feel like we need to talk about, some of your favorite parts of that before we move on to talk about other things. So Bryan, tell me, what was your best day flying in the RCAF?
So ironically, even though it led to eventually a medical release, I would say that my tours overseas were my best days flying in the RCAF. It's very satisfying to fly on a super regular basis with the same crew all the time in the same aircraft. You really get used to how everything's going to go. You're working as a team. You get to know everybody and kind of how all their idiosyncrasies work together. Also, there was this feeling of like, okay, we're in Iraq, we're fighting against ISIS, we're taking part in global events, and you feel like maybe you're hopefully helping to make the world a better place. And at least certainly we were helping a lot of people who lived in Iraq to not fall under the subjugation of ISIS. So for that, it was very satisfying.
And I think that was like the era where you felt like you were finally trained and actually doing your job, which for anyone that's gone through the process, it's just so much learning and so much training through all the different phases to finally like be on your aircraft doing your thing for real on a real mission. I think that was huge for you.
Yeah, 100%.
What was your hardest day flying in the RCAF?
So I would also say that some of my hardest days were my tours overseas. Obviously, I was pretty scared a lot of the time, which is part of what led to my trauma injury. I've also never been more tired than during my first tour, like just totally exhausted. Our schedule was all over the place, and it was really hard to get on a good sleep pattern. We had challenging conditions, and like I said, there were threats that I found scary, despite the fact that we were taking really excellent precautions. And as far as like how tired I was actually so tired that when I got back, we went on our honeymoon within a few days of me returning home to Canada, and I was just a wreck. I could hardly keep my eyes open. I was basically falling asleep at our first night at dinner.
The biggest party pooper.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. We had fun, but I was exhausted.
What was the coolest experience you had flying in the RCAF?
So I have two coolest experiences. The first one was getting to take you and your family flying in the Aurora for Family Day. The second cool experience is like a very quintessentially East Coast experience. I got to do a fly past in Digby with the Blue Nose 2. So for our younger listeners who may not be familiar with it, if you look at a dime, assuming you ever carry change, that is the ship that is on the Canadian dime. And they had that ship and a couple other tall ships that were sailing up and down the Sound in Digby. And we basically did, I would say, half a dozen fly pasts for the crowd, just going in at the minimum altitude we were approved for and doing high speed passes, climbing up, coming around and doing it again. It was just a really cool experience to get to do that kind of thing. Yeah, it was awesome.
What are your feelings about the military now that you have released?
So overall, my experiences and feelings with the military are positive. I still think it's an amazing institution. I've enjoyed my career in the military a ton. And truthfully, I cannot think of another one that I'm going to enjoy as much. Like, that's one of the hardest parts about moving on, is that this was a dream job. And I'm trying to imagine, like, what else would I enjoy as much? And it's so hard to think of something that I would like that much. So obviously, I feel really positive about it. I'm not going to miss the bureaucracy. Like, I won't miss working in a place where it takes 6 or 7 months to get a response on if you can do a podcast or not. Like, I found that pretty frustrating. But every organization has its faults. I am looking forward to the freedom of not being in, but I recognize that we have it so good in the military, and there's going to be a ton of things that I'll miss.
Oh, yeah. I think it's going to be interesting watching you transition to what I like to refer to as the real world.
Yes, definitely. I've already had to learn about health insurance and dental plans.
And you made your first visit to a real doctor and pharmacy.
That's right. It was eye-opening.
What will you miss the most about being in the military?
So the first thing that I'm going to miss is the camaraderie. I think that is something that I'm just not going to find anywhere else. I think just by the nature of the organization and what we do and the shared experiences we all have and the hardships we go through, that the camaraderie that builds is just second to none. I'm also going to miss, I know we're both going to miss when we move next, the instant friends factor of being in the military. When you move, you go to a new posting, you go to a new unit. Hopefully there's some people there that you already knew, but if not, like, you definitely meet a couple people in the first week. By the end of the week, you've got a few buddies, your spouse meets their spouses, and everybody has friends. You're going to barbecues and all that kind of stuff. So that we're going to miss, because the next place we move, we're not going to have a base. We're not going to have a posting to go to. We're going to have to figure out how to make friends as adults in the real world. And I think that's going to be really weird.
Yeah, I think the military families in general do a really good job of, like, just welcoming new people into that community and helping you find your place in your community. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And then, of course, the other thing I'm going to miss is just the adventures and the variety of experiences and, seeing the world for free and all that kind of stuff.
So what's next for you?
So the short answer is I don't know, but I think that's okay. At least at first, it's going to take some time to kind of get my feet under me, figure out what else do I want to do, and go pursue that. But I think, like I said, I think it's okay at first to not be sure what you're going to do, especially with a medical release, because the release was unplanned. The release was something we knew was probably coming, but it wasn't part of my plan. So it kind of makes sense that I'm not ready to go with this second career. And I'm trying to kind of give myself grace with that and take some time to figure that out. In the short term, I'm basically just going to focus on getting better, staying in good shape physically, because I know that also leads to better mental health for me, and doing the podcast.
I'm sure your listeners are excited to hear more podcasts coming.
I hope so.
What are the biggest challenges ahead you see for restarting the show?
Initially, from behind the scenes, I'm definitely going to be rusty in terms of conducting interviews, editing, getting the show online, just all the little things that it takes to make a podcast happen. It is a lot of work, and there's going to be some steep learning curve again with just getting things back online. The other two things that I see as a challenge, which luckily the audience can help with both. The first is regrowing the audience. I can only imagine that in 7 months, a fair number of people have given up on the show or thought that it's not coming back or lost interest. So obviously you, the audience, can help us by spreading the word that the show's back online, by telling some friends about it, telling people who may be interested in aviation, or especially with aviation within the RCAF, about the show. The third challenge is going to be coming up with new ideas for shows, which again, the audience can help by suggesting guests, topics, all that kind of stuff.
So now that you're out of the military, how will this change the show?
So I think to the audience, hopefully it will be fairly transparent. Like, there won't be a big change, like in terms of the quality of the show, in terms of how often it comes out. I'm hoping to keep all of that kind of stuff the same. But potentially, I'm hoping that now that I'm out, there will be a little less red tape in terms of me accessing certain guests. And I believe I should have access to some fairly, I don't want to give anything away yet because I'm not sure what's going to come together, but I think I should have access to some fairly high level guests in terms of people positioned fairly senior in the RCAF. So hopefully we should have some really cool guests for the audience to listen to soon.
Awesome. Any other future plans for the podcast?
Basically, the plan is to keep it going as before. As long as we have enough content, I'll keep putting out episodes every 2 weeks. But we recognize that once we cover all the fleets, we've kind of picked a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and it's going to be harder to come up with unique ideas for shows. So it may come to a point where we need to slow down and put out episodes monthly just to sort of give us time to come up with ideas. But again, that's where the audience can help with suggestions and bringing forward guests. So you can reach out to the show with topic ideas and guest ideas to @PodPilotProject on all social media and the Pilot Project Podcast @gmail.com.
So in case you didn't know, or your listeners, the RCIF has a podcast now. Why should people listen to your podcast?
So the first thing I'd point out is that we aren't in competition. I actually was involved with that show. It wasn't my idea, but I was involved with the early stages of it, and I actually hosted one of their first episodes. It's a cool show, but it's focused on the RCAF as a whole. So not just pilots. It focuses on all trades, all walks of life within the RCAF, which I think is great. But our show is more pilot focused. The goals of the show are to help pilots in training and to help pilots succeed and to learn. So I think we offer fundamentally different things. But like I said, we're not in competition. And I think more podcasts on RCAF aviation is a good thing.
When do you expect the first episode of the podcast to be released after this one?
So we're going to start releasing episodes again on the 30th of July and every 2 weeks after that.
All right. Now, before we wrap up, I've got a few retirement jokes for everyone.
Okay.
Including you.
Great.
Brian doesn't know I'm doing this. I mean, he does because I told him I was going to do it, but he doesn't know what I'm going to say.
I can't wait.
All right. Why did Bryan decide to retire so young?
Why?
Because he finally reached his cruising altitude in life.
Oh my gosh.
That's the worst one. The next year better. All right. Why did Bryan decide to retire?
Why?
Because he was tired of always winging it. All right. Last one. Why did Bryan decide to retire?
So they're all the same joke with different punchlines?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because he realized life's too short to always have his head in the clouds.
Oh my gosh. I said I was trying to gain listeners, not lose them.
Come on, those were good.
It was fine. All right, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to hang out and do the show with me. I'm really excited for releasing a bunch of shows and for getting this back on the road.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right, that is going to wrap up our reintroduction episode. For our next episode, listeners will remember a former guest we had named Scott Harding. We caught up with Scott when he was just finished his Phase 3 multi-engine flight training about 6 months ago, so we'll be hearing all about Phase 3 multi-engine flight training and a little bit about where Scott is heading next. Do you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard in this episode? Would you or someone you know make a great guest for the show, or do you have a great idea for a topic for the show? You can reach out to us at @PodPilotProject on all social media or the Pilot Project Podcast @gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners. We'd also like to take a moment to thank all of you listeners for coming back and having a listen to the show. We know it's been a while, so we really appreciate your time. In the meantime, you can help us get that audience back by liking and following us on social media, sharing the show with your friends, and following and rating us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Keep the blue side up. See ya!
Engineer, shut down all 4. Shutting down all 4 engines.